Good evening, everyone. I have 6:30 over here on my end, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Holly Grand. I'm going to be hosting our webinar here this evening about the Abandoned Crab Trap Removal Program. Before we get into our presentation, I do just really quickly want to cover a few things about how this webinar is going to work this evening. As attendees of the webinar, you will be unable to unmute yourselves or start your video or access the chat. Instead, if you have questions or comments that you would like to provide for us during the presentation, please use that Q&A feature that's located on the bottom of your screen in Zoom. It looks like 2 chat bubbles. You can type your questions in there at any point during the webinar, but we will not be responding to them until the conclusion of our entire presentation. And I think that's really everything I wanted to talk about. So we will go ahead and jump into the presentation and the webinar and what we're here to talk about today. So like I said, my name is Holly Grand. I work with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's Coastal Fisheries Division, and I am our Outreach and Education Coordinator. And as a part of that, one of the programs that I coordinate kind of on a statewide level is our Abandoned Crab Trap Removal Program. So I'm going to be spending some time talking about that program, how it started, why we have it in the first place. And on the call today, too, I also have some of our partners who were very kind in coming out this evening and spending some time with us. We have Lisa Scobel with the Galveston Bay Foundation, Allan Berger with the San Antonio Bay Partnership, and Jim Olive with the Christmas Bay Foundation. They are each going to have some time towards the end of the webinar to speak about some of their needs for this program and how you all can help with their volunteer events that are coming up in about a week and a half here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my PowerPoint up and we can go ahead and get started. So like I said, we are here today to talk about the Abandoned Crab Trap Removal Program. Make sure I've got everything that I need on my screen here. So before we talk about the program itself, I do want to spend some time talking about the blue crab fishery that we have here in Texas. Blue crabs are a commercially important species here, and this number is very old, as you can see, but about 5 million pounds of blue crab were worth about $6.4 million back in 2016. So again, that's a fairly old number there. Back in 1998, there was a license moratorium that was established, making the crab commercial fishery a limited entry fishery. So basically what that means is we are not currently selling any additional crab trap licenses for commercial fishing. However, the ones that currently exist can continue to exist if they so choose. In the year 2000, we implemented the crab license buyback program. So crabbers who did not want to continue to hold their license are able to potentially sell them back to Texas Parks and Wildlife Department if they choose to do so. And this isn't necessarily the only way that we can help to create a sustainable fishery with our blue crabs, but it's definitely one tool that we can use to, help to stabilize some of these fishing efforts and help to ensure that we have healthy fisheries here. So, and a little bit of background about some of these commercial crab regulations. Each commercial crab license will allow the crabber to set 200 traps. Anyone who holds a finfish commercial license is permitted to set 20 traps per license. So that is potentially a large number of traps that are along the coast every single year, or at any given point, given point along the coast, right? To give you an idea, during license year 2020, we had about 172 licensed commercial crabbers. So that, multiply that by 200 traps, that's approximately 34,000 traps that could be set by just our crabbers along the entire coast. And I do have a picture of the gear and what these traps look like up on the screen here now. They're, pretty much just like wire mesh cages or traps that are set. They cannot exceed 18 cubic feet. They must have escape vents in each chamber, and that's to prevent some either undersized crab from getting in, also ways for things to get out if they should not be in the trap. And they also must have a degradable panel, so that if that trap does get lost or abandoned for whatever reason, eventually that panel can kind of open up and allow things that enter the trap to also leave them, which helps to prevent some mortality. You'll also notice that on this picture here, we've got a float on one end, and they all have their float on them, and then there should also be a tag that has some information about the crabber, their name, their license number, that sort of thing, which must be applied to that near that float within like 6 inches of it or so. And that's the way that we're able to identify, which traps belong to which crabbers. So in 2001, Senate Bill 1410 was passed during the 77th legislative session. And pretty much what that says is there's a mandated closure of the crab fishery that happens every single February. And it always begins on the 3rd Friday in February and will extend for 10 consecutive days. This program, this closure period, has happened annually since 2002. That was the first year of the program, the first year we were able to get a bunch of volunteers out to help. And since then, we have had about 4,000 volunteers, about 1,300 vessels help us to remove, I believe the number as of 2022, so as of the closure last year, our volunteers removed 41,418 traps along the entire coast over that 20-year period. And before I get too far into this too, I do just briefly want to talk about like how these traps may become abandoned as well. I think a lot of times, these traps can be expensive. I don't necessarily think the crabbers are out wanting to leave them out there purposefully. What happens a lot of times, what we see is that, storms come through, they may shift where those traps are if the crabber is unable to get out and remove them, which makes them hard to locate again when they are able to get back out in the water. Their floats may also be either cut by boat props, or maybe, they become detached some other way. And because the water's so murky, you really can't see where they might be to pick up when you go back to get them later. So there are, a lot of different ways these traps may become abandoned. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because I know that's a question I get a lot. And as you can imagine, there's a ton of benefits to removing these traps. One of which is it reduces the amount of ghost fishing that's taking place. And pretty much what ghost fishing is, it's the continual catching and killing of crabs and bycatch that enter into these traps. So when we don't have those crabbers coming and checking in on these traps and removing all of the critters that get stuck in them that should not be there or that they're not harvesting, they end up getting trapped. They die in those traps, and then more animals come in to eat the animals that died in there. So they're like continuously being baited by the animals that are in the ocean, right? So that's what we call ghost fishing. And when we're talking about the types of animals that get caught in these traps, there's a wide variety of things that we have found in these traps. Lots of different fish species, different crab species. You can see on the screen there, we mostly are finding blue crabs, but also a lot of stone crabs and sheep's head. This video here is, let me see if I can play that, showing what we found in one abandoned trap. So you can see there's just a bunch of sheep's head that are falling into the water, along with a few blue crabs as well. And using some estimation, we were able to predict or estimate that with the removal of those 41,000 traps, we have been able to save about 630,000 blue crabs since the start of the program, which is pretty impressive. And of course, there are, a ton of other benefits as well to removing our traps. Like I already mentioned, we have removed or saved 41 different species from abandoned traps. Things, again, ranging from crabs, fish, diamondback terrapins for one. And I believe I saw a picture from someone last year of a bird that they found in an abandoned trap. They also Removing them also reduces user conflict, so the bays are available for everyone to go out and use how they want to, and these abandoned traps that get left in the ocean that don't have anyone checking on them or whatever, and they're just there, can potentially cause a lot of damage to like boat propellers or even from just recreational anglers or fishermen, and may also cause damage to gear from other commercial fishermen as well. The abandoned traps can also smother some sensitive habitats like our seagrasses. And of course, you know, when you're along the coast, you don't necessarily want to go out and just look at the shoreline and see it littered with a bunch of traps either. So it helps to keep our area looking nice and clean as well. And of course, for our volunteers, there's a lot of benefits as well. It helps to keep the community engaged. There's a sense of ownership and stewardship when we are, you know, helping to provide this service to the environment as well, right? And of course, there's the camaraderie amongst our constituents as well. And you'll see that a lot, I think, when we get to what our volunteer event coordinators are able to do at their volunteer events. And I do briefly want to show some data regarding some of what we've been able to do both last year in general and over the course of the entire program. So again, that 20-year span. The graph that I'm showing right now on the screen, that is showing the total number of traps removed by bay system during the closure period last year. And as you can see, we see most of our traps coming out of the upper coast of the state, probably from like Aransas Bay north. Really, the lower coast is too salty for us to really have a ton of crabbers in those areas. So we're seeing most of our efforts taking place along the upper coast. And you can see that with the number of traps that are removed from each bay system here. And this is the total number of traps removed by bay, but this is from the start of the program in 2002 through last year, 2022. And again, we're seeing, you know, essentially the same thing, where most of the traps are coming from the upper coast, the bays along the upper coast of the state. You'll see there is a pretty big dip though when we get to Matagorda Bay, where there's only 3,000 traps removed over the 20-year span of the program. There are likely still a bunch of traps in Matagorda Bay, but because it's in a fairly rural area, it's a lot harder for us to get a ton of volunteers out in that area. So, you know, there's potentially still a lot of work to be done there. Although we are, you know, as you can see with the efforts last year, we're slowly trying to get some folks out to that area as well. And this is just showing the total number of traps removed coast-wide by year. So the first year of the program, we removed about 8,000 traps coast-wide, which is the most we've ever removed in a given year. And you can see that there's been a pretty steady decline, pretty sharp decline at first, especially with the number of traps that we're removing every single year. And this is a good thing. This means the program's working. We don't necessarily want to be removing more and more traps every year. You will maybe see a little bit of an uptick here in the recent maybe 5 years or so. That could potentially be due to increased effort in getting more people out in you know, different parts of our bays as well. So let me talk a little bit about this year's crab trap removal program. The crab fishery this year is going to be closed from February 17th through the 26th. At any point during that 10-day closure, if you own a boat, you're out fishing or you're kayaking or whatever it is, and you see a crab trap, that trap is considered litter and can be legally removed by anyone who sees it. So if you are out, you see a trap at any point during that 10-day period, please feel free to pick it up and remove it. We will have supplies available at each of our Texas Parks and Wildlife Department coastal fisheries offices, things like tarps, gloves, hooks. Those will be available for you to use if you plan on going out. You just reach out to your local coordinator and they will get that those supplies ready for you. We also do have trap drop-off sites, designated trap drop-off sites at several areas along the coast. A list of those was included in our press release, and I will make sure that list gets included in a follow-up email that you're going to get from Zoom tomorrow for attending this webinar, so that you'll know where to go if you do end up finding any traps along the coast and where you can leave them. Each one of those trap drop-off sites is going to be very clearly marked with a banner, which I do have on the next slide, so you can see what that looks like, but it'll have very clearly have a banner on it saying where to drop those traps off. We do also have larger volunteer events that typically take place on the first Saturday of the closure. The backup date is going to be the second Saturday of the closure if the weather is for that first Saturday. So there are going to be volunteer events taking place on February 18th this year in all of the bay systems that are listed on the screen here: Galveston Bay, Christmas Bay, Matagorda, San Antonio, and Aransas Bay. And these are the folks that I have on our webinar here tonight. They're going to spend some time talking about their specific programs and their needs. So we'll learn more about that in just a minute. I do want to point out, though, that due to the trap cleanup efforts that are happening in Louisiana, our main volunteer push out of Sabine Lake is not going to take place on February 18th. Instead, it will be taking place on February 25th, so that we can, make that cleanup effort a little bit easier along those state lines there. And again, if you need any resources to help in some of those cleanup efforts, you can reach out to your local contact in that area specifically. And I'm sure we'll hear this many times from each of our partners who will speak a little bit later, but there are very few opportunities available for land-based volunteers, but we really need a lot of our boats. We need boaters out scanning the water, seeing what they can find, looking for those white floats to see if they can bring any traps back. And we will, again, hear from our partners in just a little bit about some of their needs. But before we get to actually hearing from them directly, I do just want to take some time to thank them and everyone else who either is providing actual donations like our gloves, water, tarps, those sorts of things, or just contributing in the form of actual dollars. Also our volunteers who donate their time as well. We really can't do this without the help of all of these people and, all of our volunteers who participate too. So like I mentioned, we are very lucky here this evening to have some of our partner organizations here. They are going to talk about their specific events, their needs, and if you are interested in participating, they will let you know who to reach out to, how to get in touch with them, and kind of what to expect. So I'm going to start kind of the farthest north that we can along the Texas coast and work our way down. So we're going to start with Galveston Bay Foundation and Lisa Scobel, if you would like to share your screen.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Scobel. I'm the Marine Debris Programs Coordinator with Galveston Bay Foundation. And Galveston Bay Foundation is a conservation nonprofit. We've been around for 35 years now. We started in 1987, and our mission is really focused on preserving and enhancing Galveston Bay as a healthy and productive place for generations to come. And one of the annual events that we do in coordination with Texas Parks and Wildlife is the Abandoned Crab Trap Removal event. So our event is in Fort Anahuac Park. Specifically, we're going to be located at the Anahuac Boat Ramp. This is in Chambers County on the northeast side of the bay in the Trinity Bay area. And our event will be February 18th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We're going to be providing lunch. So we've got hot dogs, PB&J, just a typical picnic lunch for all of our volunteers. And we've been really lucky this year. We've got a number of fantastic partners. So Chambers County Solid Waste is going to be providing a dumpster at the Anahuac Boat Ramp for the entire 10-day period. We've got the Chambers County Sheriff's Office who's going to come and bring a couple airboats. And they're also going to have some trustees to serve lunch. We've got the Chambers County Parks and Recreation. They're going to be providing portalets and of course letting us use the park and have access to the boat ramp. Texas game wardens are going to be there. And then we've got a lot of volunteers this year coming from the Houston Zoo, which is fantastic. We've actually got 40 volunteers coming. And so a lot of just really fantastic partners. We're hoping for a wonderful event. And kind of that being said, one of the things that we're really looking for this year is boaters. So we've got a lot of land volunteers, but what we really need are people who have shallow draft boats. Anahuac is a little bit shallower, so we're asking for people with flatboats or airboats. If you're able to come and join us on the 18th, we would love to have you there. We're asking boaters to arrive by 9 a.m. so they can go out and start collecting some of those abandoned crab traps, and then they'll bring them back to the shore for our land volunteers to dispose of. Additionally, since we've got all of those amazing volunteers and employees from the Houston Zoo, we are asking if boaters would be willing to take a few of them with them on the rides, because they are going to be very essential for helping us with species identification. So one of the things that we're really focused on doing is not just collecting the traps and disposing of them, but also being able to document what species we're finding, whether dead or alive, so we can report on that information, both to Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, but also to some of our partner organizations. So if you can join us on February 18th and you have a shallow draft vessel, please do reach out to me, Lisa Scobel, lscobel@galveston.org, or you can contact our volunteer coordinator, Megan Judson, mjudson@galveston.org. We would be happy to send you information and the registration link and get you set up. So again, if you can come out and join us, we would be so appreciative.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank
and now
you.
we're gonna, yeah, for sure. So we're gonna work our way down the coast now. Jim Olive with the Christmas Bay Foundation will speak a little bit about their event.
Yes, hi, this is Jim Olive. I'm the founder of the Christmas Bay Foundation, and we joined this program because it matches up with our mission to protect and preserve Christmas Bay and the surrounding estuaries. Our okay, here we go. Our program starts at 8:00 a.m. at the Sidler's Boat Ramp at Christmas Bay, which is off of Blue Water Highway, easily found across from the Peregrine townhomes. And that little road dead ends in the bay, and you'll notice this when you get there. We have been participating in this since 2002. And I'll tell you, this program is very successful based on what our results have been. The first time we did it, we filled an entire 40-foot dumpster up with crab traps that were stomped. And so we get average about 50 or 60 every trap event. This is some shots of our guys. They're stomping them, and Texas Parks and Wildlife has a boat down there. Brazoria County has a boat, along with the Gulf Coast Rescue Squad with their boats and John boats, and then private volunteers bring boats. So we'll get you in a boat or a kayak. We have quite a number of kayaks that are available for free use, and we will assign boats when you get there. We meet up at noon, bringing all the traps back in to stomp them down and put them in a dumpster. And the more volunteers we can get, the larger area we can collect traps from. And that is, here's Christmas Bay, as you can see, and Bastrop Bay. And then we do all the surrounding areas there, including off of the ICW with Nix Lake and Salt Lake, Wolf Lake, Drum Bay, and the ICW itself. And we have a Boy Scout component. The Scouts come with us and are able to pick up their merit badge and rank, along with community service. So, you know, we hope somebody all come on out and meet us. And Brian Slavin, the Texas Gourmet, is making chili for our lunch that day, and also we'll have sandwiches. So we hope to see you down there.
Thank you so much, Jim. And just to clarify, if they're interested, all that information is on the Christmas Bay Foundation website, correct?
It's on the website and on our Christmas Bay Foundation Facebook page.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
All right. And then we're going to wrap it up here with Allan Berger with the San Antonio Bay Partnership. There we go.
I think that's got it.
Yes.
Hey, again, my name is Allan Berger. I chair the San Antonio Bay Partnership. We're a nonprofit with an office in Victoria, but our workplace is the Bay. Our mission is to protect the San Antonio Bay Guadalupe estuary, which kind of is shown there in yellow. Just to get you oriented, here is Pass Cavallo, Port O'Connor, Seadrift, the river up toward Victoria. The community of Allswell sits here. This is the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, and this is Matagorda Allan, which is also part of the refuge. The way we go about our cleanup is that we design a comprehensive and systematic search for people out of Port O'Connor, Charlie's Bait Camp, Seadrift, or Allswell. We define areas for people to search, and we recruit boats and volunteers to accomplish the task. We have volunteers from agencies and businesses that sign up every year to do this, and it takes us all 10 days to get this done. We get started on Saturday, but it really takes us all 10 days to get it done. And usually the other 10 days, we only have about 6 days of good weather. So in addition to the groups and the agencies, we recruit volunteers from local CCA chapters, from Texas Master Naturalists, and from conservation-minded individuals. Again, we assign a team an area to cover. In addition to just picking up traps, we have a pretty extensive data collection program. We use an ArcGIS program called Field Maps, and that we get some help from U.S. Fish and Wildlife to collect data on the location, the owner, and the content of every trap that we remove. What the data has shown is about half the traps we pick up are windblown to shore after a windstorm. About a quarter of the traps are in shallow water that you can't get to, the crabber can't get to very efficiently with a winter low tide. But about 25% of them we find in open water that are retrievable by the crabbers' boats. Then after we go out and spend the day or the day doing this on Saturday, we'll have a celebratory party at a local restaurant, have dinner, a party, and with entertainment, and some thank you gifts for the volunteers. But we use this data to plan our next year's event. So what do you need to do to be able to volunteer? Our problem is that our search is limited by boat availability. So I need boats. Airboats and flounder rigs are especially useful. I have limited opportunities to place volunteers on boats needing crews. A few more on weekdays where I have volunteers out that need crew, but on the Saturday, it's a pretty tough go to do this. A lot of our volunteers are bringing their family and friends and making this a day on the bay. And so there's limited opportunity unless you can find a buddy with a boat. We're typically on the water from 9 till as late as 4 p.m. Some of these places are an hour's boat ride from the dock. And so we have a ways to go to get there and then to get back. I do have some dockside opportunities on Saturday for unloading the traps, processing them. We've been trying to increase our metal recycling of the traps, or the cleaner traps. And that takes a little bit of work to cut some of the plastic off of them, get them squashed, and get them stacked so that the metal recycler will take them. What's required are warm clothes. Fishing waders are necessary to retrieve traps from shorelines. I have gloves and hooks and other types of things, but what an individual needs to bring are the warm clothes and waders. There are opportunities on some of the boats for what I call a data hand, somebody whose hands are dry that can use the phone app to enter the data as a trap is retrieved. After the closure, since we have 5 different locations where the traps are piled up in bins, there's an opportunity to retrieve some of those traps and try to increase our metal recycling. I operate under a grant from the NOAA Marine Debris Grant, and one of the things we promised to do was to try to increase recycling of the old traps. It's a very effortful job to do that, and obviously you're not doing it for money because you don't make a lot of money, but it sure feels good to accomplish that. If you want to consider helping, you can contact me. You can see my email there. And then if you look at our website, there'll be some information there about the details of the plan itself. This is ghost fishing in action. You see the crabs all stacked up in the traps that were retrieved. You can see it's dirty work. Everybody here is dirty pulling up the traps out of the water. They can be stuck in mud, so they can be quite heavy. But it is also very rewarding. You see the people are all smiling. You get the accomplishment of having your boat fill up the traps. The shoreline looks a lot better. You see the bin full of traps, so you know you made a difference. So that's quite pleasing. We save a lot of blue crabs. You see them holding up there. You see an example of a pregnant crab on the upper right there. In addition, you see other critters that we're saving. You see a redfish entrapped in the upper left, a diamondback terrapin trapped in the two pictures on the right. Believe it or not, that turtle survived. I was amazed he was still alive when I pulled him up, but there he was. And then also, Holly mentioned a bird that we found. That's my wife Bridget holding a clapper rail. We pulled that from a trap that had been blown to the shoreline. It was on land, but it had some crabs and stuff in it, and so the rail must have crawled inside trying to retrieve a easy meal and got trapped. But Bridget released him with a smile. So there's not everything you see in the traps needs to be saved. The decorator crab on the left is quite interesting. We see a lot of those. See a lot of little mud crabs, and I think that's a lightning whelk on the right there. A live lightning whelk, not one inhabited by a hermit crab. And so our goal is to look everywhere in the bay and remove all the traps we find. Last year, and the earlier numbers I was talking mostly about San Antonio Bay, but we work very closely with the Matagorda Bay people and the Aransas Bay people. And collectively, last year, we had 184 volunteer days during that 10-day period, 61 boats, and over 1,000 traps removed. Holly gave you the details on the closures, sign up. In addition to the places listed there, there's some efforts in Aransas and Matagorda Bays as well. They suffer, as we do, from boat availability, but they try to place people if an opportunity comes up. I mentioned our funding comes from, for this effort comes in part from the NOAA Marine Debris Community Grant Program that was attained to the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries Program. We do have some additional support that comes from the GBRA and the San Antonio River Authority as well. So that again, I'll send my contact information as a final slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allan and Jim, and of course, Lisa as well. I hope this information is beneficial to everyone who was able to join us either here live or who is able to view the recording as well. I am going to throw my contact up on the screen now for everyone while we wait for some questions. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to type those in at this point. If you have additional questions about the program itself or some of the data that I showed, please feel free to reach out at the email address that's on the screen here. That's going to get you directly to me. For everyone else, again, their contact was shown during their part of the presentation. And when you get that follow-up email from Zoom tomorrow, I'll make sure to include contact information for everyone and the list of trap drop-off sites and our Texas Parks and Wildlife Department regional contacts where you can go to pick up maybe some of those materials that you might need if you were to go out on your own to collect traps, things like our tarps and our hooks. We'll give it maybe another minute here. I'm still not seeing anything in the Q&A. And while we're waiting here, maybe another few seconds or so, I do want to take some time to thank our partners who again took time out of their evening to come and present some information about their events with us this evening. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we can't do what we do along the coast without the help from not only our volunteers, but our partnerships as well. So thank you all again for taking some time to be here this evening. And I'm still not seeing anything from our Q&A, so I'm going to assume that we are fine and there are no questions, or they might come later. Again, please feel free to reach out to us at any of the contact information that we showed during the presentation, during the webinar this evening. We are always happy to help, and we hope to see you guys out there. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Allan, Jim, Lisa. I appreciate it a ton.
Thank you, Holly.
Appreciate the
everyone.
opportunity.
Have a good evening.